What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of On the Bluff. I am your host, Christian Fowler, and joining me, as always, my co-host, Gabe Kuhn. Gabe, what's up, brother? How was your Super Bowl weekend?
It was great. Feels like I ate like a pound of hot lead,
Yeah,
and my stomach is still not
really?
so happy with me. That may be TMI for folks if you got imagery from that, but yes, it's exactly that. I mean, it's been rough. I've had a tough national hangover slash stomach ache day. It's been pretty brutal. But the Super Bowl was great. Went to a nice Super Bowl party. Had a ton of fun. Had a ton of fun. How about
Yeah,
you?
yeah, it's the same. I mean, the Super Bowl party was obviously the highlight because the game was not, unfortunately.
Right.
The worst part about it was I usually don't get excited for the Super Bowl because it's just not a hardcore fan event. I mean, as hardcore fans know, like not many people look forward to the Super Bowl. If you're a hardcore fan, it's kind of like casual fan day. So
Yeah,
typically,
I
I'm
have
not
to hear people talk about like commercials and the
right.
halftime performance and be more excited for that than the football. And people ask me too many questions about football. I'm like, I should have stayed home.
Yeah, I mean the Super Bowl is probably my least favorite football week of the year.
That's
Not
insane though to say, isn't it?
yeah, it is, but it's true, and it's not that I don't. I enjoy it. I like it. It's football. It's the last game of the year, but like the feeling on week one is a million times better than the feeling going into the Super Bowl. It's just it is what it is. But anyway, for this one, I was excited. I was like, this is going to be a good game. We get a rematch of what we had 2 years ago, which was one of the best Super Bowls of all time, and it was a dud. So yeah, the Super
Right.
Bowl party was definitely the highlight, not the
Hey,
actual
and what do
game.
you mean it's the last football of the year, dude? We got the boats coming up soon. What are you talking about, brother? We
The
got
last
the Memphis show boats
the
led by
last
Ken Wisenhunt, brother.
the last
Come on.
NFL of the year. I guess we can count that as well.
Yeah, we got
But
the
yeah,
boats on the way.
it's over.
And NFL draft season is going to be upon us before we know
That
it.
that's more fun than Super. I look more forward to the draft than the Super Bowl.
Well, a part of that's too. The Cowboys are never even. They haven't been in the running for a Super Bowl in quite a while.
Yeah, that would make a difference,
That would make a
obviously.
difference for you.
But even I mean, I'm super excited for the championship weekend every year, and we
Yeah.
we never been there either in my lifetime. Um, but yeah, it was a good weekend, but the Super Bowl definitely disappointed, and I won zero squares,
You won zero squares.
zero
How
squares.
are you feeling, man? Your guy Patty Mahomes loses. Doesn't look in. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but I know you're a big Patrick Mahomes gusher. You gush for that guy.
It was
You're a
unfortunate.
Pat Mahomes gusher.
It was unfortunate. It felt like watching the Super Bowl, whatever, 3 or 4 years ago against the Bucks. Felt the same.
Yep.
And we'll talk way more
Bro,
in depth about this.
they've gotten their ass kicked in Super Bowls
Yeah,
when they've lost.
I think I heard today that their point differential in Super Bowls is -23, maybe.
They've lost by 40 combined in the two losses.
Yeah, and then all the wins have been pretty tight. Other than the first one, I think they beat San Francisco 31-20. I think that was by a pretty wide stretch their biggest Super Bowl win, but yeah, it wasn't fun. I had to watch a NFC East rival win the Super Bowl and probably my favorite player in the league blow up in that situation. So not ideal. But
Yeah.
we'll go ahead and tip everybody off. The hot three is going to be fully Super Bowl focused. So we're going to talk a ton of Super Bowl. We're going to talk about the game itself. We're going to talk about some moments from the game, players from the game, lasting
Legacy
impact
talk.
and legacy from the game. So we've got a lot of Super Bowl talk coming in the hot three. But let's start the show off with the University of Memphis basketball program. They went 2-0 this week, beat Tulsa, avenged a loss against Temple in two games that were very similar, close first halves, and then they kind of ran away with it in the second half. So, kind of just business as usual over the past week. Playing bad teams and having to win those games. And if in the month of February you have bet the team that Memphis played to cover and the over, you would be 3-0 in those games on those parlays. I was looking at that today. Wish I would have got in on that action and I didn't. I was thinking about doing it for South Florida, but I already know if I did it, it would be Memphis
Yep.
would blow them out and it'd be a low scoring game. So not going to do that. So if you're listening, maybe don't do that. But 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 anyway, Gabe, about those two games, Tulsa and Temple. What do we take away from another week of not very fun basketball?
Dane Danger and PJ Haggerty 1-2
Yep.
punch. It's there. They had 44 combined points against Tulsa and 38 combined points against Temple. They're going to be really damn hard to beat if both those guys are going at the same time. So
Right.
we've been talking about that 1-2 punch, but it's showing up more often than it's not. The other thing that you're seeing is the ability that this team has to win in other ways, to find other guys to give them good minutes. PJ Carter is the guy we've been discussing. We talked about him last week. Still in this 5-game stretch he's been on, shooting about 50% from three. He was
Right.
another 2 for 6 performance against Temple. He had 8 points in the game. He's playing good defense, getting knockaways, doing all that. But I think, one thing that we didn't quite expect heading into that Temple game is Tyrese Hunter wasn't available, and we don't
Yeah.
know when he's going to be available. It's very confusing, sort of what's going on behind the scenes. I think it's an injury of some sort, but we haven't gotten full clarity on it. But Dante Harris, like the mid-season transfer, steps in, 14 points, 6 for 8 from the field, couple of knockaways, didn't turn the ball over. Like for them to be able to have multiple options, it's pretty substantial. And I thought about it this way, and just shoot this right back at me if you think I'm being ridiculous. I
Okay.
think this is like the perfect melding roster wise of what 22-23 was with Kendrick and DeAndre and what 23-24 was with David Jones and all the talent they had littered up and down the roster.
Yeah.
Now, I think they're more like 22-23 in the fact that they don't have a whole bunch of big egos. 23-24 had that. But I think you have found a way to obviously bring in experience. You have your pecking order set. PJ, Kendrick, Dane is DeAndre, like that type of thing. And then you have the 23-24 reserves and the fact that you have a bunch of guys
You're deep. Yeah, they're
that
much.
were
Yeah.
bigger names on the transfer portal, and the heap of talent is a lot bigger that you can get outside of PJ Haggerty and Dane Danger. You have a lot more guys who can give you some really valuable minutes, and I think 22-23 with Kendrick and DeAndre missed that. 23-24 had more of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect encapsulation of the last 2 years, and it just shows continued growth for Penny and his roster construction and the way that he's building this thing. And realized, okay, there was pieces that we got right in 22-23. There was pieces that we got right in 23-24. Now, how can we make that work? And he did exactly that. He got the star caliber players without the ego
Yes.
from kind of from both of those teams, because you would not say Kendrick and DeAndre were really egocentric. So you have like your pillars, your stars that you had on that team, and also 23-24 with guys like David Jones. But then, like you said, you have the depth that you haven't had, and it's come in ways that we didn't see it coming. Like no one really expected PJ Carter to do anything this year, and he's been huge coming off the bench for them. Dante Harris, like you mentioned, stepping up for Tyrese Hunter and playing extremely well, and keeping Memphis running offensively and giving another option behind PJ Haggerty and Dane Danger. So it really is. It's a perfect melding between those two. You have the depth, you have the star power and the elite level talent without the ego, and that is the way that you have to build in college basketball nowadays. You have to be deep because a injuries happen, b guys have off nights, but also egos are everybody has an ego, but there's a I kind of just imagine like this imaginary meter, and if you go into the red or past the red, then you cannot sustain a successful basketball program. It just doesn't work if you have 6 7 guys that want to be the number one, or that want to be the guy that's on every tweet from the account, or every time a national game is televised, that's they want their name to be the first one that's brought up by the announcers and things like that. So you can't have that in modern day college basketball. And so I think Penny and the staff did a great job constructing this roster, and even being able to sustain an injury to one of your 2 or 3 best players in Tyrese Hunter. Now, obviously, they're doing that against way inferior opponents, and that will change if and when Memphis goes to the NCAA tournament. But for the next, what do they have? 7 games left, I believe, on the schedule. For the
Yep.
next 7 games, say Tyrese was to miss extended time, the guys have stepped up to show that, look, if we play 75% of our ability, we're gonna be fine.
Yep.
We're better. Even without Tyrese Hunter, we're better than the rest of this conference. We've avenged a loss without Tyrese Hunter, a game that we lost with him earlier in the season, and then you look at just the rest of the month: South Florida, Wichita State, FAU, Rice. I mean, yes, Tyrese Hunter's a big piece, but you've had enough from guys like Dante and PJ Carter that you're okay. You're gonna be
Yeah.
fine.
And Nick Jourdain had 11 in the game against Temple, and
Exactly.
Kobe Rogers has been knocking down some very timely threes, and like you're just getting a lot from a lot of guys, and they're making me feel so much better about really how good this team is, because it's
Yeah.
kind of funny. Like we do this show every week, and we talk every single Monday, released on Tuesday, of course. We talk every single Monday about this team and where you're at, and it's kind of funny. Like I sort of liken it to like with my son right now. It's like I'm around him every day. So like when I have like extended family members come around or the mothers come around, they're like, "Oh my God, he's grown so much." It's like, well, I see him every day. I don't
Yeah.
really notice it. It's like with this team, you just sort of look up now well into February, and they're number 14 in the AP poll, number 14 in the coaches poll, according to Evan Maya, who does Evan Miyakawa, evanmaya.com. They have the number 11 resume in the entire country. I still think their predictive metrics are complete bullshit, but that's a different discussion. But you just sort of look up week after week, and the excitement I think is building slowly but surely, because it's
Yeah.
like they really are well deserving of the ranking they have right this second.
Yeah. And that's kind of the next point I wanted to talk about. New AP poll drop. Memphis is 14 going into Thursday's game against South Florida. And really center this conversation around: do we think Memphis is actually a top 15 team? Is this a case of a team that's had a weak conference schedule and they've ran through it for the most part, and so that's where they're ranked, or do they belong there? And I think what you just brought up about having their resume as a top 12 resume in the country is where I land on it, because yes, there have been some hiccups, and Memphis hasn't covered in a lot of these games against these bad teams. But I'm old enough to remember what they did in non-conference and beating UConn and beating Michigan State and beating Ole Miss and beating legitimately some of the best teams
Right.
in the country. And so I know you could have people look from the outside in and say, why is Memphis up there? Like, we saw them lose to Temple, and we've seen them play close games with bottom 50 to 100 teams in the country according to the predictive metric rankings and all this stuff. But they've stacked up and went out there against some of the best teams in the country, albeit early in the season, whatever, if you want to make that argument. But they are capable of being one of the best teams, one of the top 15 teams in the country any given night. And I completely believe that. I think I think we'll probably see another gear hit in the conference tournament, even though it's the same teams. There's just more on the line, so I think we'll see them hit another gear there. And then I think when they get to the NCAA tournament, we'll really see them flip the switch and do what they were doing in non-conference. So I know that it bumps and bruises and hiccups along the way, and it's never going to be perfect, but roster for roster, resume for resume, I genuinely think they're one of the top 15 teams in the country.
I think without question. And
Yeah,
like, let's go through some of the checklist items, right? You need good players. Well, you have a player in PJ Haggerty leading the charge who's going to be a first team All American,
right.
likely going to win the Jerry West Award for best shooting guard in America. You look at him as well, like he's going to be probably conference player of the year.
Yeah,
And he's going to be first team All AAC. Dane Danger, probably first team All AAC. Since he's became a starter, 17 points per game and 9 rebounds per game. Like, you look at that, probably one of the best bigs in the league. They're number one in shooting from the 3-point line the entire season. Like, you don't get there by being a bad team. I can tell you that right now.
right.
So that would lead us to believe that they're a good team. And also, you have to have a fair amount of wins and a good resume, and they have that. They had the number 9 out of conference strength of schedule, and they went 10-3. I mean, I don't know what else I can say to really convince anyone that they're a top 15 team. It's ridiculous, because all the metrics right now. I saw Net 44, Ken Palm 44, Bart Torvik 53. And you look at some of the teams ahead of them and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? I know you insert these into a computer and it's a formula and you get what you get when you put it into the computer. But you need to adjust something, right?
Yeah.
And I know they're not saying it's like a power ranking like, the AP poll is or whatever. But at some point, you can't have Memphis behind Arkansas, who's had
Right.
one decent win all year on the road at Kentucky, and then Kentucky lost 2 straight, after that game. You can't have Ohio State ahead of Memphis in any realistic metric of any sort when they're going to be an 8 or 9 seed. You can't have SMU, who is not even picked to be in the tournament by most bracketologists, ahead of Memphis in all these metrics if you want a serious metric. Now, I understand last year Bart Torvik predicted the downfall of Memphis, but it feels like right now, having them at 53, he's trying to predict this downfall that's not happening. And it's just, I think in the end of the day, they check way too many boxes as a top 15 team for us to doubt where they're at number 14 in the country.
Yeah.
They check way too many boxes.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And then even when you look at the losses, yes, you have Arkansas State, and that's a bad one. And yes, you have Temple, and that's a bad one. You avenge the Temple loss, so that helps a little bit. But your 2 main losses are Auburn and Mississippi State. Those are 2 really good losses to have.
Auburn's number 1 in the country even after losing. That's
right.
That's how freaking highly thought of they are.
Right. So even if you want to add that on the checklist, and then if you want to go to the eye test and just say, okay, let's not look at how they won in conference. Let's not even talk about how they beat the teams that I mentioned earlier in non-conference. Let's just watch the team and how do they play, and it obviously goes into the players and the stars that they have. But when you watch them, you're not going, this is a team that's just kind of being floated by a bad schedule or whatever, and they're 20-4 because of who they play. No, it's because on the floor, the product that they have, the way that they play matches up against some of the best teams in the country.
Yeah, and they beat Clemson, by the way, and Clemson beat Duke this weekend. They're the second best team in the ACC, but they've beaten the number 23 team in the country, the number 21 team in the country, the number 19 team in the country, the number 11 team in the country. You don't do that by not being a top. You got to be a top 15 team. You got to be one of the best teams in the country to be able to rack off that many wins in the top 25.
100%. Gabe, we have any other talking points? Anything else we want to hit on Memphis basketball before we move this along?
I think I'm good, brother. I think I'm good.
Okay, well, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back on the other side with a fully focused Super Bowl Hot 3.
The Grizzlies made a statement today, in my opinion. Zach Kleiman, GM of the Grizzlies, made a statement today. And he basically said that, I think he made a statement to 3 players on this team. And I think those 3 players are Vince Williams, Jalen Wells, and Gigi Jackson. And I think he told those 3 dudes today, look, I trust y'all. Y'all are my guys. I stepped up to the podium and drafted all 3 of y'all. And I think that he said today, y'all are my dudes. I don't care how young y'all are. I don't care how inexperienced y'all are. I trust y'all now. I trust y'all in the playoffs. And I trust y'all for the duration of your contract and beyond.
Tune in to The Anthony Sane Show, Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
What's going on, and how in the world does Luka Doncic get traded to LA?
It really kind of boiled down to me that I thought Nico was just kind of tired of dealing with Luka. The first thing that popped into my mind, if everybody remembers that video last year, I think it was when the Mavs made the finals.
Yes.
Luka was with his dad drinking a beer.
Right.
Nico walked over, just took it out of his hand, dapped up his dad, didn't say anything to Luka, and just walked off. I think there has been tension a long time where I just think Nico didn't want to deal with it anymore. And there was issues about his weight. He doesn't work out. Like, they had to stop this man from drinking sweet tea. I just think there was issues, even though they made the finals last year.
Would you have traded Desmond Bain for Luka?
Yes.
Would you have traded John Morant for Luka?
Yes.
Would you have traded Jaren Jackson Jr. for Luka?
Yes.
Tune in to the Grizz 901 postgame show, live after every Grizzlies game on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. What up, boy?
Get down. How you doing, brother?
You guys good?
Oh yeah,
How's everything going?
lovely.
Great first segment. Great first segment. It is a weird conversation to have about the Tigers. Like, you know, I said this in the Discord earlier today. It's easy to critique a team you see day in and day out, and that you watch every minute of every game that they're playing, right? Like, it's easy to critique the flaws. Every team in college basketball has flaws, like everybody does, and there's certain teams that you know, certain styles of play the Tigers match up really well against, and I think they've proven that in the non-conference. Now there's certain teams that they don't. You know, look at the big losses. It's Auburn and Mississippi State. You know, those really big physical teams they struggle with. So we'll see, man. But congratulations to the Tigers. Y'all ready to get to the Hot Three?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Let me turn this down just a little bit. This is a Super Bowl Hot Three. This is going to be all Super Bowl. I got to watch the game from home with my wife and my daughter, who one of the highlights of my year, boys, is that my daughter has become a football fan. And
Yeah, that's awesome.
and it's so cool to be able to sit. Now, I'm not going to give you the reasons why she became a football fan, but she's a football fan, and that's all that matters to me. And so it is really cool to be able to sit down and watch the games with her. Even last night, she had a blast watching the game, even though the game was not great. But yeah, that's been a fun time. But so we got to watch the game last night. Let's get into it, man. Let's recap it. Super Bowl 59. You guys tell me, man, like, what were some of the major takeaways from the game in terms of just what happened on the field?
Trenches. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the whole story of this entire game. It looked eerily similar to the 2019 Super Bowl, like I mentioned at the top of the episode. Patrick Mahomes could not be protected. All year the Chiefs struggled on the edges. Jawan Taylor at right tackle has just been tough to watch. If you watch a lot of football and watch the way that he jumps off the line and gets off the ball and misses a lot of the times, he's been tough to watch. And it was a rotating door at left tackle, so the Chiefs kicked out All-Pro Joe Thuney to left tackle, and that patched up the issues for a minute. But what it did in this game is it made the Chiefs' interior offensive line too weak to deal with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and the rest of that defensive
Milton
tackle.
Williams.
Milton Williams as well. Yeah, that whole defensive tackle rotation, because you take a guy like Joe Thuney away from Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, and there's a weakness with Caliendo at left guard. So the Chiefs have been patchworking that offensive line all year, and they ran into probably the best defensive line in the league in Philadelphia, and we saw how that transpired.
Yeah.
On the other side, the Chiefs did a wonderful job of slowing down Saquon Barkley. That was the only positive I think you can take away from this game for the Chiefs, that their front seven played really well against Saquon Barkley. And you can also say Xavier Worthy had a really good game, even though most of that was in garbage time. But the Eagles' offensive line, which is the best in the league, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson, they kept Jalen Hurts clean for the majority of the night and allowed him to win the game with his arm. He was crisp. Other than the interception earlier in the game, he was pretty perfect because he had plenty of time. The Chiefs were selling out to stop the run. Eagles said, okay, we'll beat you through the air, and that's exactly what they did. So this game was won and lost up front, offensive and defensive line for the Eagles. Kicked the butts of the Kansas City Chiefs on their offensive line and defensive line. That's, to me, the whole story of the game. There's nothing outside of that. You take the best player in the league away because you're getting pressure from the edges, tries to adjust, and then the pressure's coming from in the middle of the offensive line, which he does not like pressure up the middle. That's what happens.
Yeah, and Jalen Hurts, I have to give him credit on top of the trench battle being won by the Eagles. I give him credit for being more of a gamer in this situation than Patrick Mahomes was on the other side. He just made the right plays at the right time. Some of the scrambles he had were beautiful. He had 11 carries, 71 yards, and a touchdown. That was a big difference in the game as well. You couldn't get Saquon going, but guess who got going? Jalen Hurts, because it's so hard to defend a backfield that's that well-versed running the football. But I thought Jalen Hurts was just unbelievable. It factor, gamer, the whole thing we've seen since he was at Bama and at Oklahoma. Like we know this about him, but it definitely came to life in the NFL. Going and winning a Super Bowl really on his back was damn impressive. But I find it kind of funny the way that the Eagles D-line exposed that offensive line, because I didn't expect it to be that much of an ass whooping. They had 6 sacks, and the Eagles have a good front seven and a decent defensive line, but it's not what it was the last time they played.
No.
They were the best sack team in the league the last time they played. They had the highest sack percentage. They fall into sort of like 10th, 11th in sacks and sack percentage. So I didn't expect, like, we have Josh Sweat having the game of his life and Milton Williams having 2 sacks. Those guys had 2.5 sacks and 2 sacks respectively. And it's just like, I don't really know where that came from. If you just go look at the way that they got them too, they weren't blitzing.
No.
There was 42 dropbacks in total for the Chiefs, and on those 42 dropbacks, you know how many times the Eagles blitzed?
0
times. They had a 0% blitz percentage. So 4 man rushes were getting back there consistently. And I do want to give credit where credit's due. I think that they played some games up front, some twists, some stunts to try to free up a guy like Josh Sweat, sort of pick plays, taking tackles or guards out of it and really confusing their assignment. I thought they were just really good at getting 4 men home. And you give it up to Vic Fangio for that. Vic Fangio was really good at improving this defense that needed some improvement heading into this season. That was the missing piece, and he figured it out. He found that formula for them.
Yeah. No, that's about it. That's about it.
I want to say one more thing. All right. It's time to, if you're the Chiefs, I know you won 2 Super Bowls with no pass catchers besides Travis Kelce. I know. Like, you want to spend money on the defensive side of the ball, make Spags side of the ball good. I think we need to get back to where they were in their first couple of Super Bowls, where you had weapons on the field. Because Travis Kelce's getting no younger. Hollywood Brown and aging DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy just aren't enough. They need a premier pass catcher out there. I just didn't see that. I think that was pretty missing. I think that was something that was missing for them.
Yeah, but I'll push back a little bit. Their best pass catcher got hurt early in the season. Rashee Rice was on pace to have just a disgusting year. And I think he is capable of being a 1. And I think Xavier Worthy, we watched him over the last 5 or 6 weeks.
Rashee Rice is a 1?
I think he can be
a 1.
Yeah. With Patrick Mahomes as quarterback, I'm not saying for
yeah, you're not saying in general he's a wide receiver.
Not in general, but if Mahomes had Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, and Rashee Rice, we could be talking about this differently. Now, do they have an alpha? No, they don't necessarily have an alpha, but with if they have Rashee Rice this year, that receiving core is so much better than the last 2 years. So I think they're close. I think they're closer than we can see right now.
Right.
Hollywood missed the majority of the year. Rashee missed the majority of the year. That really messed them up offensively and made them have to change everything.
I think you'll agree with this sentiment. I just think their offense needs to get back to some explosion. They don't have 100%. Any explosion.
Well, and this is the last point that I'll make on this. But you see, at the end of the game, desperation. They go deep and they chunk one to Xavier Worthy. And it's like, where was that in the first
He runs a 4-2, guys. You could have done that the whole game.
It doesn't have to be dink and dunk. Like,
right.
It's still Patrick Mahomes. Like, you saw the way that he stepped up and just piss missile in the basket. Like, beautiful throw. And it's like, there's Patrick Mahomes. We haven't seen that Patrick Mahomes in 2 years. Like,
so I think you get what I'm saying.
I do. 100%. They need to open it up. Open it up.
As much as I applaud them for changing their schemes based on personnel and finding different ways to win,
you have the best.
I think the peak Chiefs are definitely a team
Explosive.
that skews things to Patrick Mahomes,
Yes.
lets him have a lot more explosion in the pass game.
Yes.
Year, sure, they were 15-1 during the regular season, then they sat guys in the last game of the year, and they won a bunch of games by one score. But like, I feel like you would create a whole lot of separation against a lot of these teams you played this year if you had that explosion that you used to have.
Yeah, let's get Matt Nagy out of there. Let's get somebody in with a little bit more creativity because Matt Nagy's bland. And I know Andy Reid is the CEO of this, but
Sure.
An offensive coordinator with an offensive head coach, they mix in some things. I think Matt Nagy's not a great OC. I think he's very bland. He was in Chicago as well. Bring in somebody with a little bit more excitement because you still have the best quarterback in the league. Like that throw that he made to Xavier really was stupid. Double coverage, dropped it in the bucket. Let's not keep Patrick Mahomes from making mistakes like they've done the last 2 years and let him just kind of pick a defense apart. Let him go out there and sling it. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. This year and really last year too, for the most part, it's like you're downplaying Patrick Mahomes' skill set. You're not letting him use his full skill set with personnel and with play calling. And it's just like I don't know why you have a quarterback like that if you're not just going to open everything up to use his skill set and make teams have to deal with him consistently.
It's like having the best card in the deck in your hand and never playing it.
Yes. Yes, that's what I mean by it. I know they were great this year. They lost one real game with their starters, but that to me has been missing for the better part of 2 years.
Agreed. All right, Kenny.
What did y'all think, Gabe? Before we move on, I need to know. Just give me a quick rating of the halftime show. I know this isn't.
Give me a nice. I'll give it a nice 7 out of 10.
Okay.
I agree.
7 out of 10. I know he played all right when they were in SoFi a couple years back. Kendrick did, and that's like my favorite Kendrick song of all time. I'm not a big fan of Humble.
Okay.
I could always do without Humble.
I wanted to ask you this. That's a really big song he has, and before in our pre-show talk, you had some hot takes about Humble.
I think Humble's garbage. I think Love's terrible. I didn't like that album.
Yeah, we needed some collard greens with some Good Kid.
Good Kid, Mad City. Like I enjoy the newest of the new and the oldest of the old from Kendrick.
Correct.
There's some stuff in the middle that that was critically acclaimed and people loved. And it's probably a well-written song and a well-rehearsed song, and they did well with it. But I don't like Humble. I don't like it. I'm not a fan of that song. I think it's lame as shit. Personally, I think it's a lame ass song. But I'll give it a 7 because really what I was paying attention to, most people we're gonna play Not Like Us. We know that. But what was he going to say?
Did we think that?
Hey, Drake, we hear you like I'm young.
Yeah, boy.
Cell Block 1.
That's my.
Like, yeah, buddy.
That's smile at the
Yes.
Fire.
So that boosted up the rating pretty substantially.
Agreed.
And that's what I was paying attention to.
And
I'm sure Drake was punching walls.
And having two Drake X's out there and Serena Williams.
Yes, that was she was crip walking, and I mean, it's funny as shit, dude. Yeah. And I will say this, like the artistry of it, like he's got a lot of subtlety to the way he raps and the way he performs. And if you don't know what he's trying to get across, you won't catch on to the subtlety. You see like some weird, there was like conservative, like political talkers like, oh, we're going to America. Samuel L. Jackson is Uncle Sam, and they got people doing the American flag. I'm like, that's not what they're doing, guys.
Yeah.
What you think they're doing the opposite.
Yes.
They're not lifting up the flag necessarily, guys.
Most of this is tongue in cheek.
They're making a political statement that they don't necessarily like what's going on in the country, but okay. Go, you guys cook. That's fine. But there's subtlety to the way he performed and some of the imagery that you have to catch up to after the fact.
Yeah. They call them Easter eggs, and you can go on TikTok and YouTube and see, and there are people that have, as a camera guy, as a guy who likes the visual side of things, his visual framing and the way that, dude, it is epic to me. And so for me, it was one of the better ones that I've seen. I don't need 70 artists to come out, like all big artists to come out. I want, like Rihanna's show a couple of years ago, phenomenal, and it was just her. And Kendrick, kind of the same deal. I loved it. Anyway.
But okay, to be fair, the Dr. Dre
Phenomenal.
Out everybody was
Yeah.
fucking sweet.
Yeah.
That's my favorite one in recent memory.
Mine
when
too.
they brought a bunch of artists out. But I generally agree with that sentiment.
Yes. The nostalgia of the Dr. Dre one was, oh God. Anyway, all right, let's get to the second topic. Man, we have been talking about Patrick and Andy Reid and all those guys for a long time and how great they are, and they well deserved. I mean, they are fantastic. But Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts are the quarterback and coach, respectively, for the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, actually, not respectively. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about those guys, man. Like, it feels like the narrative around Sirianni all year was that he's not serious enough and that he's too emotional to be a Super Bowl winning head coach, and that Jalen Hurts, man, Saquon Barkley's the dude. Like, you put it in Jalen Hurts' hands, it's just not going to work. And I think both of those dudes kind of shut up the critics a little bit last night. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
100%. I'll start with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is stamped, brother.
Yeah.
I don't care what you say. He's not the best thrower of the football. No one's going to act like he is, but he does enough with his legs and enough with his arm to put stresses on defense that aren't already there.
And he's a winner.
And he wins and he wins and he wins. And he's got whatever it is. I don't necessarily, like, when we get to the done with his career, he may not have a bunch of Pro Bowls and all pros and all that type of stuff, but he will have the contract and he will have wins under his belt and a Super Bowl win and a Super Bowl MVP. Because he is as steady as it gets, man. He's as steady as it gets. Now, I will say this. He has always had a really damn good roster, but it's not like he is minimizing that roster. And he's maximized all the rosters he's been a part of. Now, there's games where he doesn't maximize A.J. Brown, doesn't maximize Devontae Smith.
Yeah.
But more often than not, that's sort of a product of the game plan and how the offense is being called.
Yeah.
And I think we lose sight of that a lot.
Yeah,
There's been a lot of drama back and forth.
Don't forget, A.J. Brown was like top 3 in receiving yards last year and an All-Pro.
Right, but Jalen Hurts gets a lot of criticism, but he rises above it, man, every time and just wins and sort of shuts people up. That's what he's done his entire career dating back to college.
Yep.
And then Sirianni, you go ahead with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I agree completely. You got to look at a couple of things. First, he was beat up all year. He had multiple injuries all year. And that's not an excuse, but that's just part of it. You know, we've seen it many times. Guys get injured and they're just not as good. So that was something that he dealt with for a lot of this season. Also, let's not forget, I don't think he's ever had the same offensive coordinator twice. Was Shane Steichen there for 2 years?
I think Steichen may have been there for 2 years.
Exactly. Steichen was the only one that he had for more than 1 year, and he had his best season ever in Steichen's second season, which was the last time they went to the Super Bowl. So he has no consistency at the OC position. And then this was a run-focused, run-centric team this year. It was built around Saquon Barkley, and rightfully so. But also, this dude just steps up in big games. He always had, like, you look at his 2 Super Bowl appearances in his career. He's a little over 500 passing yards, around 150 rushing yards, so about 650 total yards of offense, 2 passing touchdowns, and 4 rushing touchdowns, I believe, in 2 Super Bowl games. So he's a gamer. He steps up in the biggest moments. He plays his best games in the biggest moments. 2 of the probably 5 best games of his career have come in the Super Bowl. And I know it doesn't always look perfect. He's not Mahomes. He's not Allen. He's not Burrow. He's not Lamar. He's not, a top 4 quarterback in the league. But after those guys, you got to start having the conversation. And yes, I know the regular season bodies of works haven't always been perfect for him, but how many Super Bowls do those other 3 guys that I mentioned after Patrick Mahomes have? 0. And what's everybody's excuse for why those guys don't have Super Bowls? Because they can't beat Patrick Mahomes. Well, Jalen Hurts just stood toe-to-toe and outdueled him. So I mean, I get it. You don't have to say he's better than those 4 guys, but you have to respect the body of work that he's put together. He's a Super Bowl MVP. Can't take that away from him. And he went head-to-head with one of the 2 best quarterbacks of all time.
It's just funny. Like, he's not the best thrower of the football, but here's the one question you always have to come back to when you're talking about NFL quarterbacks is, can he make the throws? Mm-hmm. Yes, he can make the throws. That's all. That's the only question I need to answer. Now, Nick Sirianni, this is a different thing, man. This is a different thing. This is rarefied air this brother is in right now. 4 years in, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl win, a 706 win percentage. 70.6% of the games he plays in, playoff and regular season, he wins. And all I've seen on this guy is criticism and people not liking him. And he's not the grown-up in the room. Jalen Hurts has to be the grown-up in the room. And, in the end of the day, I'm tired of that because I've always sort of looked at Nick Sirianni as maybe he's not the best coach in the league, but damn, man, proof is in the pudding in the end of the day.
Same thing as
He's
Jalen
been to
Hurts.
4 playoff
He's
appearances
a
in
winner.
4 years. He
Winner.
wins. He does it. This is a different level of NFL head football coach. He's a great NFL head football coach. And you just, if you have a different take, you're wrong. I'm sorry. Now, I will say Howie Roseman has definitely gifted him a lot of good rosters, but he's maximized those rosters as well.
Yeah. Now, my biggest thing on Nick Sirianni, and me and you talked about it on your show last week, Gabe, think back to 15 months ago, the Eagles were 10-1 and it fell apart. And you had people calling for Nick Sirianni, had people calling for Jalen Hurts, wanting them out of there, especially Nick Sirianni. That's what everybody was like, get him out. We're tired of this. We don't care that he went to a Super Bowl last year. He just let this season implode. And it didn't look good. Optically, it didn't look good. All the stories that were coming out behind the scenes, it didn't sound good. And so to go from a season where you're sitting at 10-1 to getting first round bounced by the Bucs, who were an inferior team on paper, no doubt, last year, you had a lot of people coming into this year saying the Eagles are going to be disappointing. It doesn't matter how much talent they have an incapable head coach. So to go from an implosion and people calling for your head to winning a Super Bowl against, like I said, a top 2 quarterback of all time and a top 2, probably top 2 head coach of all time too. Top 3, 4 at worst. So to outduel Spagnuolo and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and have an incredible game plan, and it even goes past that to bring in a guy like Vic Fangio and realize this guy's a former head coach and maybe I am losing control of the ship a little bit, so let me bring somebody in who can help me in that area. That's the biggest thing a coach should be able to do, to admit when they're wrong and to fix those things. And he did that in spades with bringing in Vic Fangio and having Kellen Moore.
I was going to say, dude, he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. He's about to get Kellen Moore a head coaching job.
Exactly. So that's my biggest point on Nick Sirianni. Like he was at a crossroads in his career, and let's say the Eagles would have went like 8-9 or 7-10 this year and missed the playoffs. He was out. I think he was more firmly on the hot seat than we realized because Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie, they do not deal with losers. Like the Eagles are the winningest franchise in the NFC of the 2000s, which is crazy to think about. But it's because those guys have put them in positions to succeed. And if you are not winning games and the talented rosters imploding, you're gone. So he was at a crossroads this year and he came out with the Lombardi Trophy. So you might not like everything that he does. You might, disagree with some things, but he's a winner. He's a Super Bowl champion, and he's one of the best coaches in the league.
Yeah, a lot of these teams, man, it is kind of funny, the Eagles, how they have won their last 2 Super Bowls. Like, a lot of these teams, like when you look at the Patriots and the Chiefs and their dynasties, like there's drama along the way, but there's not that level of drama when you go win a Super Bowl. You're not winning a Super Bowl if you have the level of drama that the Eagles seem to have every single year. But you had Nick Foles win one of them, and Carson Wentz was having an MVP caliber season, and everybody was questioning that. How the hell is that going to work? He runs them through the playoffs and handles business. And then this one, A.J. Brown's bitching, reading books on the sideline. 4 weeks into the season, they're 2-2, and everybody's calling
yelling
job. Nick Sirianni's yelling at everybody. There's disagreements all over the sideline, and at the end of the day, here they are at the end, hoisting that thing, man. So it's just kind of funny to see how the Eagles have been able to capitalize in these moments, where like the dynastic teams are the obvious favorites in these games.
They've stopped 2 3-peats.
Yep.
And they did it in different ways. The Chiefs were, obviously 2-0 going it, but they beat the Patriots in between the Falcons and the Seahawks Super Bowl. So they have stopped the 2 3-peats, which is pretty wild. All right, Kenny, last point.
All right, let's get to it, man. I've heard nationally, locally, all this kind of stuff. People talking about legacy, right? Talking about Patrick Mahomes' legacy. I saw somebody say biggest winner of the night was Tom Brady because he got to commentate the game. Number one, how do y'all grade? We gave 7 out of 10 on Kendrick Lamar. How do y'all grade Tom Brady's first year as a commentator?
3.
Really? 5, yeah.
Do you think it's possibly because all the restrictions placed on him in terms of the Oakland Raiders stuff?
No, it just
takes obvious things, which
not
is
Oakland, Las
normally
Vegas Raiders.
He doesn't know how to throw it to break. He's not comfortable with the timing of the whole broadcast.
It's something that
reps, but
it's something that takes time that he was rushed into the forefront of because who he was. Greg Olsen
is literally I would venture to say 10 times better.
Yeah, Greg Olsen. I feel more bad for Greg Olsen than anybody else. Like he was and is impeccable. He is one of, if not the best current sitting commentator right now, and he got kicked for Tom Brady.
And all of sports too, especially with Hubie Brown retiring.
Yeah. Anyway, Kenny, sorry.
So he won the night because he got to commentate the Super Bowl in his first year as a commentator, and then secondly, his status as GOAT has been firmly supplanted for the rest of time because Patrick Mahomes lost the Super Bowl 59. Does this damage long term? Does this damage Patrick Mahomes' legacy? And what's the fallout of this? Because let's be frank, he did not play a good game yesterday. He was bad yesterday.
2 nasty picks.
2 nasty picks. But does this damage his legacy long term?
I mean, it could if he doesn't go back. But the thing is, with players like him, this gives him – I think this fuels him more than going for a 3-peat does. Because I think he's cut from the same cloth as Tom Brady. And when you are one of the sole reasons that you lose a game like this and you play bad in the biggest moment, especially when you're used to being the guy that plays better than anybody else in these moments, like, I don't know. I think he gets some kind of ridiculous fuel from this. And he's not done. And Gabe said this in the pre-show. I'm probably taking it from him. He's probably planning on saying it now. But for the people saying that, like, Tom Brady's safe and he's good and he will always be the GOAT because of this, y'all don't know enough football or you haven't paid enough attention to Patrick Mahomes and what he's capable of. And if they do what we were talking about earlier and open this thing back up for him, I will almost stamp, guarantee, approve, without a shadow of a doubt, he will be the NFL MVP next year. Like, there's if that one thing happens, if they open this thing back up for him, he will win another MVP next year.
Guys, he's 7 years into his career.
Right, he's 29 years old.
For God's sakes, like, in the end of the day, no. Tom Brady's not safe. What are you talking about? Tom Brady played till he was 45. If Mahomes can play till he's 45, he will probably surpass him in Super Bowls in all likelihood. Because that means he's still good going into age 45, which I don't expect him to play that long. The one thing that Patrick Mahomes, I always told people before this thing, though, is like, I didn't put Patrick Mahomes on Tom Brady's level because the one of the biggest things that Tom Brady has going for him from a whole career standpoint is his longevity. Longevity is the most impressive thing about Tom Brady. He won a Super Bowl when he was into his 40s. Threw for 4,900 yards into his 40s. Threw for 43 touchdowns into his 40s. Like, that's just like, I always told people going into this thing, let's not just immediately put Patrick Mahomes at that mountaintop. I do think there's just like contextual differences too with their careers that we're never going to quite get over. Because Tom Brady came in the early 2000s, and that's not how they ran offense. And Patrick Mahomes comes in, and of course, all of his counting numbers are just going to be way better than Tom Brady's start of the career, because they were Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and Andy Reid, and they're slinging the ball all over the place. So it's like, it's different contexts that we have to discuss with this entire conversation. But no, Tom Brady's not safe. At the same time, I do think this is definitely a show that Patrick Mahomes can fail, like it's possible, and not just to Joe Burrow and Tom Brady, but to Jalen Hurts now. It's possible for Patrick Mahomes to fail. But let's not forget Tom Brady, outside of the first few Super Bowls, went 10 years without winning a damn Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He went to a few in that span, but he went 10 years without a Super Bowl. So you can't close the book on this conversation because Patrick Mahomes loses one. Now, I will say this. Tom Brady never got his ass kicked in a Super Bowl when they lost. Never. The point differential of 40 in the losses is pretty substantial. But I think that's a symptom of larger problems with that offensive line going into both of those Super Bowls. So I think that we need way more context, way more years of good football from Patrick Mahomes to even get a real feel for how this will actually end up. I think that's the best way of putting it. Everybody wants to stamp their claim right now. I will say I think what I've seen Patrick Mahomes do on a football field, it surpasses visually what I've seen Tom Brady do on a football field. But we have to have the collective resume at the end of their career to really have a feel for this thing, man, because Tom Brady's longevity is the biggest part of his greatness, and we don't know if Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to replicate that.
Right. Because, at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes is, in my opinion, bar none, the best player to ever do it. Best player to ever put on a pair of cleats. But greatness is a different thing, and legacy is a different thing, and he's still got – the mountain's not as tall, but it's still a substantial climb that he has to make.
You got 5 Super Bowls. They were both 3-2.
Right, exactly. But that was in 2004. That was in 2004, and Tom Brady played until 2020. He played 9 years after that. So there's so many different layers to this, and to simplify it into stats, and to simplify it into winning or losing Super Bowls is not doing a service to any actual football fan out there, in my opinion, or to either of those guys' legacies so far. Yep. I couldn't agree more. All right, fellas.
I got one more. Gabe, we talked about this last week, but the basketball gods are officially pissed at the Dallas Mavericks.
Oh, yes, they are. That's okay. I'm glad you're bringing this. Top 3+1. Anthony Davis already out, bro.
And they just lost Daniel Gafford to a non-contact knee injury.
Dude, how about this? Anthony Davis literally gave the Mavs his entire career work
in 3 quarters.
26, 16, and 7.
Dominant.
Dominant 4 blocks.
Dominant.
They beat the Rockets, who are 3rd in the West. And then here goes the non-contact injury in his adductor.
Then he started eating
out for months, if not the whole year.
Months, what I understand. Not the whole year. Yeah, he started eating Super Bowl food early and had the Gabe Kuhn syndrome in the middle of the 4th quarter. That's what happened. He had a stomach ache. No, it's just, and now he's out for the year. Probably.
That was nasty to watch though. And the game 1. But honestly, you saw how hard he was playing. You're like, this is gonna happen. He's gonna get hurt in the second half, didn't he? He was playing his ass off.
He's so good when
he's
healthy.
So excited too. Like he had the intensity about him.
Yeah.
When he's
healthy,
he's
letting it all hang out.
Yeah. When he's healthy, he's phenomenal. But man, the Dallas Mavericks, they had the fan base. They had a protest out in front of the arena before the game. They brought in a casket of the Dallas Mavericks in, and bomb dogs came in to sniff it for real to see if there's any bombs.
Respectfully, dude,
and they said,
and I know I'll never get to his position or make as much money as him in my life. Understand it. I'm gonna say it, man. Nico Harrison's a fucking idiot. What a terrible! Why? What are we doing?
Somebody came in and took over that job this week, though. Not Nico as the biggest idiot in the game. The owner of the Dallas Mavericks stepped in and had a conversation, and he said, "I fully agree with this trade. When I think of quality basketball players, I think of guys that gave everything they had, who trained, who worked." Who created, and guess who the names are that he mentioned?
Shaquille O'Neal.
He said Shaquille O'Neal.
I heard.
Yeah, known for being in shape all the time. Shaquille O'Neal. You really know what you're talking about. You're
wasn't in shape like one time after like 2000.
Never. In fact, he talks about it as one of his biggest regrets. It was always known. He would gain 40 pounds in the offseason and not give a shit.
Didn't
Yep.
pick up a basketball.
Kobe despised him for it by the end of their dynasty.
That's the reason they fell out. It's because Shaq
I mean,
wouldn't
how
work.
old is the owner, honestly?
I don't know, but he's a guy. I saw a Dallas Mavericks writer say he had to put down his 4th cup of pudding to be able to tweet that out. I was like, damn.
I mean, but it sounds like a guy who's only been watching the NBA for like the last decade.
Yeah, he did not sound like a basketball head at all. At all. Oh my gosh. Anyway, just a
guys
terrible...
are in shape and care deeply in the offseason. Shaquille O'Neal, guys like that.
Yeah, it's rough. All right, fellas, well, let's call it a night on that one. We appreciate you guys for watching. If you are watching on YouTube, you can like, subscribe, and comment there. If you are listening via Apple, Spotify, or any other podcast platform, you can do all the same things there. You can also go to the website, bluffcitymedia.co. Check out all the articles, podcasts, and videos on the site. Once again, we appreciate you guys for joining us, and we will be back next week.
Thank you for listening to On the Bluff. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. Also, like and subscribe to Bluff City Media's YouTube page. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co for comprehensive coverage of Memphis sports and how you can become an insider.